So welcome to this introduction to Paracelsian alchemy, and I will be defining all those terms so that you'll understand, because the word alchemy is used quite a bit. But what do we really mean by it? And what I actually mean by it is something very traditional. And so that's what I'm going to be explaining, is how you can actually make alchemical preparations. You can call them elixirs, although the technical word is spagyrics, out of plants. And that's what I do. The reason I got into this is I'm a homeopath. That's the main thing that I do. But this kind of alchemical preparation is a precursor to homeopathy. It's an energy medicine that was a precursor to homeopathy and really inspired Hahnemann, who founded homeopathy, even though he never actually referenced it. But when you see the concepts, if you're a homeopath, you see very clearly that Hahnemann, had definitely read about this procedure as well and was basing some of his ideas on it. So, the drawings that you'll see that I'm using here.
Do you want to turn part of the lights off so we have just a little bit?
That might be nice. Yeah, thanks. The images here are traditional alchemical images. So alchemy is a science that can be done with plants, but it can also be done with minerals. There's mineral alchemy, there's plant alchemy, and then there's alchemical art. And so I'll be explaining some of these. You can already see, if you have some familiarity with symbolism, even just from the start, we have the lunar energy, we have the solar energy coming together, we have the caduceus wand, which I'll be talking about later, the two snakes winding around the staff, which has a direct connection with the yogic system of the spine and the two channels that wind around the spine. So there's a lot of similarities between yoga and the Asian ways of looking at energy systems and the medieval alchemical way. So this I'm not going to go into in any detail, but I just want you to see that in terms that alchemy has a history that dates all the way back to shamanism. That's what's underneath that. You can't see it because of the timer. It says shamanic, before 3000 BCE. So we're talking about 5,000 years of history of people who have been using energetic modalities for healing. Can everybody see okay? Am I in your way? Okay. Using energetic modalities for healing. The Egyptians, the Greeks, the Pythagoreans, and this all led up to the school of Alchemy, which was the alchemists. So I'm actually preparing a course that I had taught back in 2008 that I'm reteaching starting this January, where we do go into the history of it. But for this purpose, I just wanted to let you know that there is a long history, a long documented history to these vitalistic traditions of healing, and that there is a connection that goes back for 5,000 years. You've probably heard of Isaac Newton. Of course, he was a very famous scientist and discovered the law of gravity and all that kind of thing. But what's not known so well about him is that he was also an alchemist. And for example, John Maynard Keynes, who was an economist in 1942, said that Newton was not the first of the age of reason, he was actually the last of the magicians. Because he was doing, and in fact, alchemists in general, they were kind of like the high-tech people back in the 14 and 1500s. They were doing all the cool, interesting stuff, kind of cutting-edge kinds of things. And so Isaac Newton, very famous scientist, but he was also an alchemist and doing experiments and with minerals. And I think he was more of a mineral alchemist, from what I understand. So this is a translation that he did of a document called the Emerald Tablet. The Emerald Tablet is what all of the Hermetic arts are based on. And the Hermetic arts are alchemy, astrology, and theurgy. Theurgy being a way of communing with the divine, direct communication with the divine. Astrology, of course, being the science of reading the stars and the planetary energies, and alchemy being taking substances and transforming them and transmuting them into other things. So this is a translation that was done by Isaac Newton, and it talks about the different elements. I'm not going to go through everything in it, but you can see if you look very close, if you look a little bit, the main kind of take-home message from the Emerald Tablet is what we call as above, so below. As things are in the cosmos, so they are, in the human body, and also in the plants, and also in the minerals. And so it's this idea of correspondences between this plant on the ground that has a correspondence with a certain organ in our body, which has a correspondence with a certain planet. So the energetic connection between the planets, the cosmos, our own bodies, and all of the things in our environment is really the concept, the main concept in the Emerald Tablet. So what it says is, "'Tis true without lying, certain and most true, that which is below is like that which is above, and that which is above is like that which is below, to do the miracles of the one only thing." So then after that he talks about the elements. "The sun is its father, the moon is its mother, the wind hath carried it in its belly, the earth is its nurse, the father of all perfection in the whole world is here." So we actually have references to the 5 elements here. And we have a reference to astrology as well, the sun and the moon being the father and the mother. Then he goes into the basic ideas of alchemy. "Separate thou the earth from the fire, the subtle from the gross, sweetly with great industry. It ascends from the earth to the heaven, and it again descends to the earth and receives the force of all things superior and inferior." So there's this idea in alchemy, which you'll see when we get into plant alchemy, about separating and recombining. That's one of the concepts that we're going to talk about. And another concept we're going to talk about is this idea of circulation, of things going up into the atmosphere and coming back down. And both of these are alchemical processes that are used in the process of making an herbal elixir. So by this means you shall have the glory of the whole world, and thereby all obscurity shall fly from you. So, there's an idea of achieving a lot of clarity through the alchemical process by removing the veils, by removing the obscurations that we have, by kind of piercing the veil and seeing things in a much more clear way. Yes, so those are the main points that are in this document. It's very short, as you can see. But it contains the basic principles that we're going to be talking about. So here's a picture of Hermes Trismegistus. You've probably seen similar things before, and you can see this healing wand, which is called a caduceus. That's the Greek term. And you can see the red and white snakes, which also, as I said, in yogic traditions are the red and white energy channels of the body, and then the main channel going up. So this is just a summary and another translation of that main point that I mentioned earlier. It is true, it is sure, it is the true, full truth, as above, so below, as below, so above. The wonders of the one are enacted. So this is the real foundation of all of the Hermetic arts, as I said earlier, this correspondence between what's going on in our consciousness, what's going on in our body, and how it relates, how there's a relational and influence back and forth between the planets and ourselves and the plants. And I'll get much more specific, but I'm just kind of giving you an overview of what that principle is. So the creator of this actual process of doing plant alchemy was a healer named Paracelsus. His dates were 1493 to 1541. And as I said, my interest in alchemy came because when we study history of homeopathy, Paracelsus is always referenced as being sort of like the grandfather of homeopathy. So I started looking into what it was he was doing. Well, he was a plant alchemist. He was using these alchemical principles to make medicines, herbal medicines, and potentize them. Just like in homeopathy, we potentize substances. He does it, but was potentizing plants, but in a different way. So one of the doctrines of plant alchemy and Paracelsus has to do with the law of signatures, meaning that you can kind of tell the qualities of a plant by sometimes its color or its shape, that these things can actually reveal to us what that plant is actually for. One example is ginseng, for example. When you dig it out, it looks like a person, I've been told. You know, it's kind of lumpy and looks like a human being, and it's really good for, you know, strengthening the vital force and that kind of thing. Then he, of course, believed that there is a strong connection, or sympathy was the word that was used, between the planets and the stars and the organs of the human body. And there's an herbal that you can still get a copy of called Culpeper. I don't know if you've heard of Culpeper's herbal, where it does give the different indications, planetary indications for different herbs. And you'll see when I get into specific ones, it becomes kind of obvious when you understand a little bit about the planetary energies. Then you can see how these different herbs fit in to these different categories. So a certain plant possessing certain powers may induce certain similar vital powers to become active in certain organs if the plant and the organ are related to the same star. So, you know, for example, the heart can be related to the sun. So we can find an herb that has that same solar energy. It would be a good herb for the heart, as an example of that. Yeah. So all organic functions are caused by the activity of one universal principle of life. And this is very similar to acupuncture, to homeopathy. Any energy medicine is really based on the fact that we do have a vital force, or we might call it prana, or we might call it chi. But in any case, we have an energy that animates our body. And that's really what vitalism is about, is working with the energy that animates our body. The other view, the mechanistic view, is like treating your body like a car, you know, doing sort of mechanical repairs, but not finding out what's actually in homeopathy and in vitalistic modalities such as acupuncture and these as well, these elixirs. We're really doing a reading of the vital force, and we're working with the vitality of the body and helping it to heal, or helping it to be in harmony, or helping it to work better, rather than just doing something from the outside without considering what's going on with the energy. So here's, for example, Hypericum perforatum. Was one of his favorite remedies, and the veins from its leaves are a signature because they are perforated. It shows that the plant drives away all illusion or delusion, phantasmata, existing in the sphere of man. So he liked this very much. And it's used a lot for anxiety now, the little yellow flowers. Why is it slipping my mind? You know the herb that I'm talking about? What, St. John's wort, right, St. John's wort. So he was using it to basically remove illusion and delusion. That's what he felt it did. And the signature for it, as I was saying before, the law of signature, is that the shape of the leaves were perforated, and that so that's how he put it together. So the word that he coined for this system of making plant medicines is spagyric. And spagyric means to separate and to recombine. And if you remember earlier when we were looking at the emerald tablet, it talked about separating and combining. So that is one of the main processes, and one of the ways that the plant is refined is by a process of separation and recombining. This is a nice alchemical drawing of an alchemist's lab. You can see that if you're somebody who likes to cook and mess around in the kitchen and make stuff, that's that's what alchemists do. It's very hands-on, and it's something, and it's very experiential. You know, you're working with stuff. So you can see that, as I said before, these were the high-tech people back in the 14 and 1500s who were making stuff with plants and experimenting with doing different things. And actually, metal alchemy is more dangerous because they use a lot of really toxic stuff. But even plant alchemy, things can blow up because you're working with very high grade alcohol, 95% grape alcohol. And so things can blow up if they get too hot, and all kinds of exciting things can happen. This is just another picture of some alchemical vessels, and later you'll see that I use something similar in my process to these kinds of things, and that the shape really has some power in it itself. They're now finding that water, for example, if it runs through a pipe and loses its natural curve, it's not accepted by the body as easily because of the microclusters. And so by taking the water and turning it like this, you know, turning it around, it will actually do a better job getting into the cells of your body. So, you know, the shape of these vessels does have some significance, and in terms of how things are, as you'll see later, we're going to be talking about circulation. This, I love this one. You see the crocodile hanging out. This is just this is something that somebody made up to show what an alchemist's lab looked like in the old days. It would have been kind of fun. I really have no idea why there's an alligator, or is it a crocodile, hanging up above, but it looks kind of far out. You're definitely working with the elements. You're working with fire, you're working with air, you're working with earth, you're working with all the elements. And what?
Teeth.
And teeth, yes. So we're going to go by the numbers a little bit right now because a lot of these correspondences have to do with 2s or 3s or 5s. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the number symbology that goes in alchemy. So 2 is represents the primal material, the prima materia and the prima energia. So matter and energy are 2. The sun and the moon, of course, and we saw that right at the first alchemical drawing as well. Yin and yang in the Asian tradition. Fixed and volatile, which we'll see more of later. Some things are fixed and some things are volatile. Solve and coagule, which means to separate. Solve is separate, like dissolve, and coagule is coagulate, recombine. These are the 2 operations that we do. And soul, the soul and the spirit. And they are referred to specifically in alchemy as sulfur and mercury. And anybody who knows anything about homeopathy is already going, sulfur and mercury? Wait a minute, sulfur and mercury? Those are like 2 of our main remedies. How did Hahnemann figure that one out? Well, guess what? He knew something about alchemy. So here's a little bit more information about sulfur and mercury, the yin and the yang, the 2. So mercury has a quality of being very quick. Mercury is quicksilver, is another name for mercury. You know, mercury, like in a thermometer, if you drop it and the little balls go all over the place. It's related to the spirit, spiritus mundi, the spirit of the world. And in fact, mercury is called spirit. You know how we use the word spirit for alcohol? That comes from alchemy because the spirit is carried in the alcohol. So alcohol and spirit are really one. The eternal water that produces trembling, volatile. So it has this quality, this trembly, moving type of quality. The great sea of the philosophers and the spirit, basically. So spirit and alcohol. So you'll see how when we get to the actual process, how the alcohol carries the spirit. And that's how we do this. The sulfur is the sun. It's the yang energy. It's represented by gold. It's fire. It's got the masculine, radiant, burning quality. And in this biblical kind of thing, it's the word of God above the waters, and then the Mercury is the water that's receiving this energy from the sun. It's the dragon's head, the dragon biting its own tail. It's the original energy and is the soul or the consciousness. So twos are important, but threes are even more important in alchemy. So this is how the threes go. We have the sulfur and the mercury, which we already talked about, and then we have the salt. So in the atom, the proton is like sulfur, the electron is like mercury, and the neutron is like earth. The most important one here is the next one here. The sulfur in a plant is the essential oil. So the essential oil of the plant is the sulfur. It's the yang energy. It's the radiant energy. It's the burning energy. The mercury, or the lunar energy, is the spiritus, which, as I said before, translates into alcohol in the plant world. And the earth, of course, is the plant body. But all of this goes through a purification process. So the purified plant body is the salt. And what you'll see that I do with these is I actually burn to purify the plant body. And what you end up with when you burn it hot enough is you end up with salt. You end up with the minerals, the crystals from the plant. And then you can also see that this has the same coordinates as I mentioned earlier with the Hermetic staff, or the yogic system of having the two channels. The hot channel, the cold channel, and then the central channel going through the middle. And down here, for those of you that are homeopaths, you can see that Hahnemann took the whole theory of miasms right from him also. You can obviously see the sulfur. The remedy sulfur is for the psoric miasm. The remedy mercury is for the syphilitic miasm. And salt, natrum muriaticum, being the psychotic. So it corresponds so perfectly to homeopathy, Yeah, maybe Hahnemann made it up all himself, but he was definitely using the same principles, and he was well read, so it would be very surprising if he hadn't read this. So this is the same thing from a yogic perspective that I've already mentioned, but just showing it in a different way, that the yogic system is talking about the same three energy channels. So now we're going to talk about the elemental energies. So we talked about 2 and we talked about 3. So now we're talking about 5. There are 5 elements which were also mentioned back in the Emerald Tablet. If you remember, fire, water, earth, air, and space are the 5 elements. And those 5 elements are planets. So there are planets, the planets that I use for my alchemical processes. I use the ones that give what we call sattvic energies. I'm sort of using some Sanskrit terms here, and I'm not the only alchemist who mixes Ayurveda with alchemy. They almost all do. And I think it's because you can see such a direct correspondence. I was looking at a course that a well-known alchemist has recently put together, and it's like 50% Ayurveda. It's really something. So I'm not unique in doing this, but because if you look at it, you see it's exactly the same thing. It's just that in Asia, they weren't burning witches at this time the way that we were doing in Europe. So a lot of the knowledge was preserved much better. It's been used and never suppressed. Whereas in the West, there's been so much lost because people were being burned at the stake as witches if they were doing weird stuff. So the planetary energies that I work with mostly are what we call the sattvic planets. Sattvic are the refined. The quality of sattva means refined and high-level energy, and bringing about a kind of balance and harmony. I'm not going to go into there's sattva, rajas, and tamas. These are the 3 gunas, or the 3 kind of different states. but the Sattvah one is about balance and harmony. And that's the planetary energies I work with. Because when I'm making these alchemical preparations, I want to help people and come into balance and harmony. So the sun brings the element of fire, the moon brings the element of water, and Jupiter is connected with the element of space, which also has to do with integrating and harmonizing everything, and magnetism. And you can see, again, in this caduceus staff, the sun, the moon, and then the center one would be Jupiter, integrating everything together. So the moon, I'm going to talk a little bit about the moon. This is a very ancient carving of a moon goddess. So the moon really represents consciousness. Its light is very healing and soothing, as opposed to the sun, which can be too hot. So the moon represents healing, represents motherhood, represents a sense of nurturing. The stone that's associated with the moon, if you were trying to, from an astrological perspective, strengthen your moon, wearing pearls is very good for strengthening the moon. Milk is a food, dairy, and milk and yogurt are associated with the moon. And also balancing the emotions and in general consciousness. So it's interesting because in Asia, I do Vedic astrology, and I use Vedic astrology with the kind of astrology that I do with my elixirs. One of the reasons for that is that Vedic astrology is actually accurate, whereas tropical astrology is based on where the stars were 2,000 years ago. And because of something called the precession of the equinox, where the Earth is wobbling on its axis, the planets appear to have moved 23 degrees, which is almost a whole sign. A whole sign is 30 degrees. So that's why Vedic astrology is more accurate, because they've been tracking all of this in India. Whereas here, they're still talking about the information as if it were 2,000 years ago. So that's originally why I got into Vedic astrology. The other thing about Vedic astrology is that it has built in what we call remedial measures. Normally when somebody comes for an astrology reading in India, which happens all the time, astrology is just integrated into the culture. People want to get married, start a business, go on a trip, whatever they want to do, they consult an astrologer to find out when is the best time, or if they need to do something to clear obstacles for it first. Because the birth chart is a map of your karmas, and so you can actually look at that and say, there may be some obstacles coming up in the area of travel for you in the next 6 months, so you need to chant this mantra or do this practice or make this kind of donation. There's all different systems to clear your karmas. And this has been normal, everyday stuff in India for thousands of years. Now, for us, that's like a completely revolutionary idea. But that's why it ties in so well with alchemy, because alchemy is also about doing remedies according to the stars. So the moon represents consciousness, represents healing, represents the mother, and I've made 3 elixirs that are moon-based, and they're very, very soothing and calming and clearing of the mind, and very peaceful and kind of cooling is more the kind of lunar type of energy. The signature one for that, I would say, is lotus petals. And if you can imagine the energy of a lotus, rising from the lake and just is very peaceful, and the moon shining down. That's the energy. Okay, the sun represents the soul, represents fire, transformation. The sun also can clarify the channels and purify your energy channels. So a lot of the solar elixirs are very purifying, and people who want to do yogic practices or Tai Chi and kind of clean out their energy channels, the sun is very excellent for that. And Jupiter Jupiter, the name for Jupiter in Sanskrit is Guru. So Jupiter is the guru or the teacher and represents knowledge and has a very expansive, peaceful energy and has to do with, as I said, that quality of space or integration. And one more planet, this isn't actually a sattvic planet, it's what's called a rajasic planet, which is the rajas energy is sort of very stimulating kind of energy. But I do make Venus elixirs because the Venus energy brings a lot of bliss and devotion and love and sort of a heart-opening feeling. So it's sort of a good antidote, I think, to what a lot of our culture does to us, which kind of just keeps us in our head, keeps our energy kind of buzzing in our head. The Venus elixirs and maybe the signature Venus elixir is rose petals. So that's why I make them out of, I do things with Venus plants as well. Venus also, the name Shukra in Sanskrit, which is the Sanskrit name for Venus, means semen. So it has to do with the essence of life, and it has to do with ojas, which is an Ayurvedic term for the sort of juice of life that is found in the ovaries and the eggs and the semen. So it's very good for vitality and rejuvenation and regeneration as well. So I'll talk a little bit specifically about the spagyric process now. So in the plant world, as I mentioned, the mercury is alcohol, and it's created by fermentation and distillation, just like making any kind of alcoholic beverage. Not always distillation, but fermentation for sure. So the alcohol that we use in this process is grape alcohol, because grape is considered to have the highest vibration of all plants. And it's also like a universal alcohol. So all plants are improved with grape alcohol, but this grape alcohol is distilled. In fact, traditionally it was distilled 7 times. I don't know if you know what that means, but I used to do it myself, and it was really a hassle. Basically, you have to warm it up on one side and then have some glassware that brings the steam up, and then when it condenses, it goes down on the other side. And I used to do that myself. I would boil wine so that the alcohol would, of course, alcohol has a lower boiling point than water, so the alcohol comes over first. So if you keep the temperature at the right temperature, the alcohol is going to go over, and you're going to keep the water. And you'll see you end up with this crystal clear alcohol, and you're supposed to do that 7 times. Keep taking that alcohol and then refining it again, bringing over again and again, because it's going through that process that I was talking about earlier, that circulation of going up and down. We've already started doing that even just with the alcohol. I now cheat and buy my grape alcohol, Ashland, Oregon, organic grape alcohol. There's a company up in Oregon called Alchemical Solutions, and they sell organic grape alcohol. They also sell a lot of other organic alcohols that are used by many herbalists and alchemists for making tinctures. And they're all organic, and they make them from all different kinds of plants. But the alchemists use, did you want the name of that again? It's Alchemical Solutions, and they're in Ashland, Oregon. And about a year ago, their place blew up. Because remember I was mentioning, they had a big fire. They're okay now. They're okay. They're back in business. But I went to order some alcohol, and I was Googling the name because I couldn't remember the name of the website, and I found this little YouTube that showed that they had a fire last year, and it was the same thing. I mean, you're dealing with 95, basically it's 95% alcohol. In this system, water is a contaminant. It's like this crystalline stuff. It's 95% alcohol. So that's 195 proof, is that right? 95 plus 95? 190 proof? 190 proof. So, you know, very strong stuff. But it contains the spirit. That's the spirit. And when you try these, you'll feel it. You'll feel it because the spirit has that mercurial quality. And that's what carries the plant spirit and the plant intelligence. So the way that this is done for each step of the process. So let's say I want direct time for to make lotus, which we know is associated with the moon, or rose, which is associated with Venus. So let's say lotus associated with the moon. We're going to do it when the moon is full or on a Monday, because Monday is moon day. So certain days of the week, there are planetary hours. There are conjunctions. Doing it when the moon is conjoined Jupiter could be very good, or when it's in a certain sign. So knowing some astrology to be able to pick the kind of time that you want to do these. It's just like a birth chart. You're giving birth to a medicine, and so you want to pick its birth date. Just like when you know, now we can't pick our birth dates, but it's the same thing, like it's creating the astrology chart that you want for this particular plant by having it energetically have the energetic influences coming that you want coming onto that plant. So that's why this is why in traditional societies a doctor is an astrologer, because you have to understand how the cosmos is affecting people in Tibetan medicine, in Chinese medicine, and in many forms of traditional medicine. And Paracelsus, the founder of this, said to be a doctor you have to be an astrologer. Because otherwise, if you're not knowing you have to know what's going on in the plants, because those are your medicines. You have to know what's going up on the stars so that you know how to make the medicines and also know how it's affecting your client. And then, you know, and so this is, again, why I got really blown away when I started looking at this as a homeopath. So I can look at people's astrological charts and see what's happening elementally based on their astrology. So it's just, this was, you know, probably more than 10 years ago at this point when I first started doing this, but I've been a homeopath for more than 20 years, but at one point I got very interested in why do some people heal and why do some people not heal, and I really wanted more insight into what was going on, and this is where I found it, was in astrology. And then from there I went into the alchemy, because I thought, well, making a medicine with this would be really cool. And anyway, the grandfather of homeopathy that's what he was doing, so I'm going to do it too. So anyway, at the right time, and we pick the time, let's say with lotus, you know, when the moon is strong, we then at that point pour the 95% grape alcohol over the raw plant material, and that's like the beginning of the spagyric process. The tincture is allowed to mature, and heat and vacuum can be added to speed up the process. So you can do I do like these vacuums. You know how you have those vacuum seal things you get at Costco? You can vacuum, you can take out the air, which actually makes the whole thing more thicker and make it warm, because then the alcohol is more like yogurt. More active also. And so we have the spirit, which is the alcohol, the essential oils, which are dissolved into the spirit by the alcohol, and then we have the plant body, which has to be separated out and purified by burning. So that's where we're at right now in terms of the process. Any questions? Okay. So this process, in the understanding of this process, is that by dissolving and putting back together, we are awakening the intelligence of the plant, and that these plants can become our friends and supporters and support our vital force. They kind of wake up. It's kind of like they wake up from a dream. They get all clear, and they get much smarter, more intelligent, more sharp, more focused. And they actually, just like with wine, because they just keep evolving, they just keep getting better. just like we do, hopefully. And we don't want to dilute them with water, because as I said, water is sort of a pollutant in the system. You really want to keep that spirit strong. And I also, this is not Paracelsian, but I use mantra and sound with my spagyrics as well. That's my own little addition, because from Vedic astrology, mantra is one of the remedial measures. So I thought, why not combine it? Why not put sound, right? Do sound with my spagyrics. So I do. So after we've gone through this whole process, the most fun part in terms of fire and things like that is the calcination, which is when we burn the substance. And of course, it's been sitting in grape alcohol for weeks or months, so it's very easy to light on fire. So there's me lighting it on fire, not on a very windy day. And then it gets to a point where it's pretty black like that, and you can see it's an alcohol fire. You can kind of see that quality of it is sort of, alcohol fires are a certain way. And then you grind it to a very fine powder. And since I made these slides, I now have a dental oven from the 1940s that goes up to 1500 degrees Fahrenheit. It's just a little thing, and it's very heavy. And it's just got one speed. You just plug it in and it goes up to 1500 degrees, but I put it in a little crucible. And so I do end up, when I was making these slides, which you have to do outside because it's all this black smoke is billowing. You really can't do it inside. But now I have this dental oven that it's really amazing, because the plant body just glows bright red. It's like, looks like something from outer space. It's just glowing because it's so hot. And then, you take it out and you grind it up again, you put it back in, and pretty soon you end up with the salt, which is the minerals, basically. What you're doing is you're burning away all the carbon, and what you're left with is the minerals. So the spagyrics, in terms of the physical energy of it, and that's, the ways that it's different from a normal herbal tincture is, one, it's in 95% grape alcohol. Then there's all these other far out things we're doing with it, but the other physical thing is that the minerals are added back from the plant. So the plant body, goes back in at another. So then we have to recombine everything once the minerals, and again at the right moment, we put it all back together. The body, the soul, and the spirit of the plant go back together. Now this is a vessel I was making. This is the first one I ever made, which was Tulsi. I made Tulsi for my first one because I was really, and that's kind of the fun thing. If you get a plant that you're getting really attracted to and attached to. In fact, right now my next one's going to be kava kava. I'm really, really interested. I'm going to do kava kava, which is another moon herb. But anyway, those are Tulsi beads that I put on. It's almost like a reincarnation process, because you can see it's heavenly, or this area or higher area above it, and then there are these two tubes on the side where everything can precipitate down. So this is a circulation vessel. It's called a pelican because there's another piece of it that actually comes over like a pelican's head when you're doing distillation, but I don't use it for distillation. I use it for circulation. So I have it, that's a yogurt maker underneath. And so it's getting warmed from the bottom, so the alcohol is warming up, and it's going through its reincarnation process of turning into a gas and then precipitating down, and so it's doing what's called a circulation of going from the liquid state to the gaseous state and back down again, over and over and over. And again, you can add, you can see on the top I have a vacuum lid on it, so I have a vacuum in there, which makes it speed up even more. The heat and the vacuum make it do more. And sometimes I put a blanket on the bottom as well to keep that part warm, and then the top is more cold, so it's going through this whole heat and cold pull kind of vessel you can make in this you can make medicines that you can't make any other way, and because of that shape that I was mentioning earlier, and the power of the shape. having an effect. So this is just a little information about the word Shakti, which is what I call my particular elixirs, because Shakti is a word that means in Sanskrit power or force, but it's the feminine force. In fact, that energy is considered feminine. That life force is considered to be feminine. And there are different kinds of Shakti, which we don't have to go into all the details here. So the sun elixirs are very radiant, purifying, centering. And I think I'm going to start going into the different elixirs right now. And because I have them all here, think about what 2 or 3 you might want to try. I don't suggest trying all of them. It's too much, but keep in mind which ones you feel attracted to as I describe them, because right when we finish the PowerPoint part of this, you'll have a chance to try them. So sun elixirs have this radiant quality of radiance, purifying, centering, clearing any kind of obscurations in the channels, bringing energy into the central channel. These are some of the qualities that the sun common. Gotu Kola, which is called Brahmi, is a sun elixir. Oh, sorry. Is that better? Okay. Gotu Kola is called Brahmi in Sanskrit. Brahmi means the energy of universal consciousness. And so this elixir is about connecting us to the energy of universal consciousness, and relates to the central channel in the yogic condition, and can be helpful to move the energy into the central channel, which is useful in keeping the mind focused and undistracted. So you know how when we feel what we call scattered, this is the opposite. This is the opposite of scattered. This is the bringing in the bringing in of the energy into the central channel. If you do yoga or Tai Chi or any energy work or any energy practice, you kind of know that feeling of when energy is just coming in. And Brahmi will help with that. And that's what yogis have been using Brahmi for centuries, is to refine their own energies, because it's considered to be very sattvic. I was talking about signatures before. The little leaves look like little brains. I just recently got a Brahmi plant, and it grows really easily. I'm going to plant it. Does anybody have any Brahmi growing? Any Gotu Kola? Anyway, I got some recently, and I'm going to grow it myself. Before I've bought I source my herbs, mostly my Ayurvedic herbs, from Banyan Botanical in New Mexico, and it's all organic and really good quality herbs. So for my Ayurvedic herbs like this one, that's where I get them. So yes, it's got the signature of having this affinity for the brain and the nervous system, because the leaves look like little lobes. Boswellia, which is frankincense, is another solar. It's actually a resin, and this is a very intense spagyric, because resins dissolve very readily in high alcohol content. So there wasn't a lot of plant body left. It just sort of all dissolved into the alcohol because it's a resin. So it's got this real oily quality. And of course, it's been used in religious ceremonies and had spiritual significance, in East and West. However, in Ayurveda, it's been used to open the mind and clear the subtle energy channels. So very good for anybody who's doing any kind of healing work. Boswellia, of course, is also these days very well known for being useful for the joints and being an anti-inflammatory. So that's another use of it. So again, this was made in tune with the energies of the sun. It's very bitter, but you can still taste the frankincense. I mean, you can taste the perfume, wonderful frankincense, but it's also extreme. Crocus sativus, which is saffron, is another plant that has a very high vibration. It has 3 red stamens representing the 3 worlds. And those stamens also have that really, really bright color that reminds us of the sun, another signature. And the name says sativus right in it. showing that it has this very sattvic quality in terms of purifying the energies. Monks wear saffron-dyed robes, of course, and it's used to mark the third eye in religious ceremonies. So again, it's very good for purifying energies and refining energy. So the moon spagyrics are very tranquil and soothing, and they also are very helpful for divination. Specifically, salvia, I'll talk about in a sec. Okay, the lotus is what I had mentioned earlier. It's really wonderful for calming, purifying, having the mind have that peaceful feeling like a lotus on a lake. So the lotus really carries that very peaceful quality of the moon in a very nice way. Salvia divinorum is a great, great, great plant friend. It's illegal in 11 states. Luckily, it's still legal in California, so we can make it available here.
Why is it illegal?
Because it's kind of a trip. I mean, you can trip on it if you take enough of it. People make strong extracts out of it and go on trips, basically. It's very intense. It's used by shamans in their healing work to be able for them to go into other worlds and be able to discover the sources of people's illnesses. So it's a shamanic herb.
Also, hasn't there been something lately about kids rolling it and smoking it?
Could be. I don't know. I know that states are banning it because it has these qualities, other kinds of, and people who are using other street drugs are discovering it illegal.
So it would be a hallucinogenic?
You know, I took it once. One of my students, when she knew I was making this as a spagyric, sent me an extract that people take when they really want to trip. And it was like going into another world. It lasted about 30 minutes, but it was very trippy. I wasn't hallucinating the way that you would on LSD, but it really shifted things in a big way. As a spagyric, it's much more subtle. I take it every day because I'm working on developing my vitalistic healing course, and so I take it before I do my meditations every morning. Right now, I'm in a salvia divinorum mode. Just that I like it a lot. I'm really enjoying it. But it's more subtle, of course, as an energy medicine. We're not tripping out on some substance, but for doing tarot readings, for doing astrology readings, for tuning into your own inner guidance, for doing meditation, but the kind of meditation that where you're really looking for some kind of answer. You know, if you've got some kind of dilemma in your life and you're really looking to see what your higher guide, the weekend, just want to meditate, or you want to take the weekend to check in with yourself about things, that's the kind of thing that salvia divinorum can help with.
The screen is moving over again.
Oh, okay, I must be pushing it by mistake okay, sorry about that. There you go. Dream herb is the other lunar plant, and this is a plant that is used for dream work by shamans as well, to induce dreams, lucid dreams, and divinatory messages during dreaming. And I found that it definitely has an effect on, I remember more dreams and they're more clear. I've noticed that myself, and a few other people have as well. So again, it's a more subtle form of it, but it does seem to open up the dream world. So the Jupiter energy has to do, as I said before, with harmonizing and strengthening and clearing negativity. Ashwagandha, which is an Ayurvedic herb, which means horse smell and is said to give the strength of the horse. And I made the original ashwagandha. I've now made I'm a few generations past this, but I always put a little bit of the old in the new. the original one was made when Jupiter was in the sign of Sagittarius, and Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter, and Sagittarius is the archer, and he's aiming in. And right between Jupiter, at the tail of the scorpion, Jupiter and Sagittarius, there's a place there's a place between those two constellations, which is the galactic center. If you go from the Earth through that, and you keep going and you draw a straight line, you're at the galactic center. So it's got this idea of this sort of crack in the universe where the dark things can come out, and Jupiter is standing there with his, and represented by, the tail of the scorpion, which can really hurt you. It's poisonous. And Jupiter's standing there with his arrow pointing at it. And Jupiter in Sagittarius is very powerful, basically for dispelling negativity. And when I started taking this plant, it's actually the root of the plant that's used, and researching it, it was amazing, because it goes way back into the ancient Vedas in India, where it's said, "For as an archer his arrow, O you Jangita, dispel evil far away from here." And Jangita was the word for ashwagandha. So this connection between ashwagandha and Sagittarius is right there in the Vedas. So the fact that, Jupiter has a 1-year transit through each sign. So every 12 years, Jupiter is in Sagittarius. So I was very fortunate that I made my original ashwagandha when Jupiter was in Sagittarius, and I could kind of harness that energy of dispelling negativity. And people have found it helpful for that. Melissa or lemon balm is another Jupiter herb. This was another one that Paracelsus liked a lot and used a lot, and he felt that it held more healing energies than any other plant and could bring about complete rejuvenation. And it comforts the heart and drives away sadness, along with all troublesome thoughts and cares. That's one of the old Materia Medicas about it. Helps to heal a disordered state of the nervous system caused by anxiety and stress. And it's called lemon balm, so it's like a balm. It really is very, very soothing. And I grew this one. I grew a lot of lemon balm. Specifically, I grew it because it grows really well here, as we all know. Probably a lot of you have it in your gardens. So I grew it and used fresh lemon balm. A lot of the times I use dried herbs, but for the rose and the lemon balm, which I did out of my own garden, I used fresh plants instead. They have a little more water content that way because, there's water in the plant, so the elixirs have a little more water. So the Venus elixirs are tuned to develop the qualities of bliss, devotion, love, and the divine feminine. Shatavari is an Ayurvedic herb, which means 100 spouses, and it's a rejuvenative herb, meaning you would have the energy to keep 100 spouses happy. I don't know about that, but that's what the name means. And it's a root, as many ashwagandha is also a root, so many tonics are actually made from roots. And it strengthens the ojas, which is, I mentioned that term earlier, it's the vital nectar of life, which allows bliss, longevity, and positive thoughts to naturally arise. So this idea that, if you've got your sort of life juice in gear, you feel good, you feel happy. There's a natural radiance and a natural happiness that happens. So this is a quote by Deepak Chopra. Ojas circulates throughout the bodily tissues and heart, sustaining the physical self, bringing clarity to the mind, and balancing the emotions. In short, when the body produces ojas, the vital nectar of life, we feel blissful. The cells sing with happiness because both the mind and the body are receiving the nourishment they need. So, this is sort of a physical explanation as to how these things actually create bliss. Tulsi also is very similar. Tulsi is a very blissful plant. In India, Tulsi is worshipped as a goddess. They also say that Tulsi was at the crucifixion fiction of Christ, so it has both sides. So they say, yes, just by touching Tulsi Devi, one's body becomes pure. By praying to her, all diseases practically become removed. If one waters her or makes her wet, the fear of Yamaraj, who's the god of death, is destroyed. It's considered to be the elixir of life. I mean, I love Tulsi tea, too.
So,
Yeah. Tulsi rose tea, Tulsi, all really, yeah. So,
another proverb.
yeah, it's a wonderful herb. And rose, quote from Rumi, "My soul has merged into yours, water into water, wine into wine. Now there is only rose, only love and the scent of your rose perfume." So the rose, has that heartwarming, heart-opening essence to it that I think the Venus herbs are really important these days, like I said before, because we're so in our heads and we're so buzzy in our heads, and Venus really brings us back into our bodies and into our hearts. So I mentioned that I am teaching a course that includes Vedic astrology and alchemy. It's starting in January, and also other kinds of spiritual practices to increase healing qualities in your heart and in your being. So that you can check it out if you want. I also have some flyers back there if you're interested in finding out about that. And so at this point, we'll go and try some of these. And thank you for listening. That was his idea.